South Africa's relationship with Russia is a contentious issue in diplomatic ties with the West. As the new Government of National Unity, or the GNU, and the recently appointed Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, are trying to strengthen their outreach to the Western nations, sections of the African National Congress is simultaneously deepening its ties with autocratic regimes, particularly Russia and Iran. Well, let's discuss that with Brenthurst Foundation's Ray Hartley, who's with me. Hi, Ray. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Great to be here.
So why do you think the ANC is deepening its ties with Russia and Iran that you pointed out in a recent article?
Yeah, I think that, the context is that they were very much realigning the country with through BRICS, but also with Iran in particular and Russia in particular, who are involved in these mega global conflicts. And then we had the Government of National Unity, and quite surprisingly, the International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, did not return, despite being very popular within the ANC and cultivating a sort of global constituency, really, on the basis of her very strong criticisms of Israel and her diplomacy with the Russians. So, that was taken, I think, to be a signal that the ANC was trying to reset its relationship with the West, not to become aligned with the West, but to sort of once again be a genuinely non-aligned power of the South, with relationships with both, which are absolutely critical to South Africa's economy. And things were very quiet for a while, but now we have a kind of resurgence of this old realignment strategy. In particular, we had a Russian warship docking in Simonstown Naval Base, one of their major warships. That again is quite a strong signal of alignment, given that Russia is at war with Ukraine and does undermine South Africa's claim to be neutral in that conflict. We also have the forthcoming summit of BRICS, which is being hosted in Kazan in Russia. And this is going to be a major opportunity for Putin to kind of regain some kind of global credibility by using the BRICS forum to project himself as a sort of acceptable figure in global politics. And I think South Africa is likely to play quite a big role in that, because the relationship between Ramaphosa and Putin is very strong. And it was, Ramaphosa and Putin who drove the expansion of the BRICS group to include Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Ethiopia at the South Africa summit last year.
Well, so do you think the difficulty that the US experienced at this recent defense expo, they were waiting for certain permissions that they wanted to come, and eventually it was extended sort of right at the end. Was that sort of a sign already of this sort of, making sure that there's this alignment with Russia? And then eventually Russia was a no-show.
Yeah, I think that was notable. I mean, the Americans have always participated in that particular show and have been a star attraction because they have all these spectacularly large aircraft and so on. And the Russians were also going to be there. Now, that's kind of where South Africa wants to be. What other country does that, has this kind of ability to reach across to both sides in that way? In the end, it's not clear whether it was just incompetence or deliberate, but the Americans eventually decided that they were not getting any help to participate and they withdrew. And then the Russians, for their own reasons, are probably logistical, related to their war in Ukraine, did not arrive either. And they were scheduled to bring some of their long-range bombers to display at the show. So, I think that sort of ability to reach across to both sides is something unique and quite strong for South Africa. At Mandela's inauguration in 1994, there was a cocktail party. And at that cocktail party were Fidel Castro and Hillary Clinton, who was representing the American administration, and a whole lot of other people from all over the world. And you had the sense that South Africa was forging a new sort of non-aligned approach that would pay back quite handsomely. I'm concerned that we depart from that at our peril. If I could go on about the economic logic of it, I think South Africa has to have these relations with both these camps. So most of our high-end finished product exports go to the West, vital earners of foreign exchange, but also critical to South Africa having an industrial base that goes beyond just mining. Our resources, on the other hand, are consumed by China and to some extent by the other BRICS countries. And that's also very important to us. So for us to sort of decide to go the one way or the other, I think would be a mistake.
You've written that hardliners, the ANC, are seem to be finding their footing again, because initially the GNU looked quite centrist with the new DA members in it. So do you think that's what's happening? That is why you find that there seems to be, this alignment to these autocrats?
Yeah, I think that post the GNU, there have been developments which show that Ramaphosa is actually not as in control of the ANC as people think. I mean, he certainly was able to drive through the GNU, but that was also because the EFF made it a condition that he not be the president if they were to be in the GNU. So he really had no choice but to look elsewhere for partners. So, subsequent to that, it's clear that this arrangement only applies at the national level where Ramaphosa can enforce it. In fact, at the provincial and local government level, the arrangement does not apply, and the ANC actually actively works to remove DA mayors, as they've just done in Tshwane, working with Action SA, Pretoria. So that, and in Gauteng, they simply did not make a provincial government and national unity with the DA, even though that was the obvious thing to do in light of the GNU and looking at the way votes went in the province. So it's clear that at a provincial level, there's quite a lot of rebellion taking place. And that Fikile Mbalula actually wrote a letter warning of disciplinary action to Panyaza Lesufi over the way in which he was approaching these things. But Lesufi basically just ignored him and carried on with the activity in Pretoria to remove the DA mayor. So it's clear there's sort of an emboldening of those who are critical of the GNU and who would prefer to see the ANC go back to its old kind of slightly more radical populist approach.
So what are the events we should look at, especially internationally, with regard to foreign policy that would give us a signal to where this is going?
Well, I think in particular, we need to watch this BRICS summit closely and see how South Africa goes about projecting its relationship with Russia at the summit in Kazan, and whether there is a kind of return to the wholehearted endorsement of Russia. I think Russia will use the opportunity to put a whole lot of security and other issues on the agenda without ever mentioning Ukraine. And the way in which South Africa endorses or does not endorse that, I think would be quite telling. So that's the big one towards the end of October to watch. I think beyond that, South Africa is continuing with its case at the ICJ. and the international relations minister has shown to be very supportive of continuing with that. So that's going to continue, I think, to stress relations there and to raise questions again about why we are choosing alignment when we could be one of the countries that could bring the two sides of that conflict together. So that's something to watch as well as that unfolds.
Well, you've just mentioned that South Africa might be able to play this peacemaking role. Didn't quite work out the last time when they, first traveled to Ukraine. It was a bit of a mess up in Poland and eventually to Russia. So do you think South Africa could still play a role, particularly Ramaphosa, in brokering peace in Ukraine?
I think that if South Africa decides to do so, it could become a credible interlocutor. But in order to do that, it has to stop with the very big public flirtations with Russia, like having the military vessels docking at our naval bases and engaging in joint exercises and so on. It has to show that it can be firm if necessary about not aligning. In other words, to say to Russia, this is not a good time for your warship to be here because we see ourselves in a slightly different position. But I think we're pretty much blown around on the breeze by the BRICS countries. We seem to be just basically following wherever we're led by them. And they're pretty sophisticated. I think Russia's a very sophisticated operator, and they will use these opportunities always to drive home their reach and to demonstrate that they have support, beyond just the sort of crazy bunch, the North Koreans and so on. And I think South Africa's got to sort of up its communication and interaction with Ukraine. The visit to Ukraine was kind of an afterthought. It wasn't really there was an initiative underway by somebody else, which Ramaphosa got involved with. And then nothing has really come of that. It was almost like, okay, we've done enough to sort of put a fig leaf over our relationship with Russia. Now we can carry on the way we were. I don't see any serious drive to project ourselves as a possible interlocutor there. There's just sort of PR stuff going on the surface.
And Ukraine seems really keen to engage Africa in particular at the moment. They've got this drive in Africa. They're opening embassies. So Ukraine is keen to engage with Africa and to engage with South Africa.
Yeah, I think Ukraine is a major exporter of grain to Africa, and that's one of the things that's been disrupted by this war. But they definitely have a fairly strong economic relationship with Africa. And several North African and Horn of Africa countries are big consumers of Ukrainian agricultural produce. And they want to build that relationship. But they also see what Russia's doing in Africa, which is to go for these resource-rich countries which have these autocratic regimes, and essentially to offer themselves as a protection service by the Wagner group. They send in security, and in exchange they get access to resources, and those resources are used to fund the war in Ukraine. So Ukraine actually sees that as a bit of a battleground. And there have been, in fact, quite a few military interactions between Ukrainian special forces and Russian Wagner forces in Africa, in Sudan and elsewhere.
So this is all interesting. We'll watch that. Ray Hartley, thanks so much for speaking to us.
An absolute pleasure.